The reason we're here tonight, of course, is that we have a new speaker whom we're very excited about. She is known, she was not known to me, but she's known to many in this community, including Amy Kane in our audience, and perhaps Ginny, I don't know, but she has been recommended to us by folks at the West Hampton Library, and we're delighted that she's here, and her name is Ranelle Wolf. Ranelle is an adjunct professor at Suffolk County Community College. She believes strongly in the power of communication, learning the language, using the language of art and design to bring community and dialogue together, and believes that the greatest lessons we can learn lie in the secrets of art history and the political context of the era. So she's a communicator using the language of art, design, and history to create these presentations. And she also has an interior design business, and she was invited to participate in Hampton's Designer Showcase Showhouse in 2016 and 2017. She's been the subject of a feature cover story in Newsday, and several other articles, and we are so happy that she has brushed up on her Andy Warhol knowledge for us. So please welcome Ranelle Wolf.
Thank you. That's a really beautiful introduction. Thank you so much. And I want to thank Penny White for giving me this opportunity, because she said it so much from my heart. I believe the best political thing we can do is not talk about politics, but talk about artists and what is the takeaway and the arrangement of their life, and how do they become what they become. I want to thank also Megan for making a beautiful presentation, the nicest of all the libraries that has ever made. And
The flyer.
The flyer. Yes, the flyer with that beautiful color, because Warhol was such a great colorist. And I want to really, really thank my friend Amy Kane for coming, because she is the kindest human. She's on the board of the Nassau, I have to say, the museum, and she brought all these people to Southampton to show them the art here and to thank them for what they do in the art community. And I don't want to embarrass her, but okay. So Warhol was the first picture, the white-wigged Wizard of Oz. For me, I believe Warhol, in short, was what we might loosely call a Renaissance man. Warhol is celebrated for putting a mirror, and there's a book written about that, to our American ways by his artwork in the second half of the century. Many now say he was ahead of his time, that he had a very hard time to encounter, to really be accepted. So I want to urge you to see this show, because all the fancy people got to see it last night. It doesn't open yet, and it's going to be in a chronology of his work, and it's very important. It's in a very cool area of the meatpacking district, so if you've got a bus ride and you've got friends, so you can go there, have a glass of wine or whatever, and then get back on the bus and do some shopping. And the meatpacking is the coolest area, and Andy Warhol loved downtown. So kudos, and for doing this soon.
Register soon, because not too many seats left.
Okay. So I'm going to open this for questions at the end. I just want to give you a rough idea of his life, and I'm glad that the museum is doing this in chronology as well. So Warhol's art is a visual excavation of the most important headlines, personalities, mythic creatures, edibles, tragedies, and iconic artworks from the history of art. It's really the story about the passage of time. So when we criticize art, in reality, we're really criticizing ourselves. The power of Warhol's work really lies in how images live in the culture, and how powerful they can be, and how they need to be presented. Andy Warhol's retrospective from A to B, as I said, opens on the 12th, and these are two images let's just show you his earlier work, how he started as an illustrator, but I'm going to give you his chronology. So you've heard about Andy Warhol, and you know he did the soup cans. He was obsessed with celebrity consumer culture and mechanical reproduction. Pop artist Andy Warhol created some of the most iconic images in the 20th century. He said, art is what you can get away with, and everyone will be famous for 15 minutes. And he drew widely from popular culture and everyday subject matter. But here, let's start from how it starts. He was born to immigrant laborers. He grew up in a working class neighborhood in Pittsburgh, where the family moved close to their church, St. John Byzantine Catholic, which connected them in community to their Eastern European heritage. His mother decorated their home with icons and holy cards. It was the children's custom to drop to their knees and pray with their mother before they left the house each day. Every Sunday he went with his mother to Mass and prayed for hours. I especially love putting this together because to the very far left shows you where they came from in Eastern Europe. But note how the church is very prominent in this little poor little town. It's important to his culture, it's important to his mama, and what's very interesting is I'm showing you the church that's in Pittsburgh. I also want to point out and highlight, look to the far right, Byzantine Church. For those of you who might have heard my lecture or went to Heavenly Bodies at the Metropolitan, we began to start in this era to connect the dots to artists who were connected to the church and the Catholic imagination. You must keep this point connected. It's very crucial, and it's gone unexcavated. So why Shirley Temple up on the right? He was very, very sickly, and he was bullied. His mother overcompensated and kept him home as a child, because on the first day of kindergarten, they bullied him, and his mom kept him home. So he rode away to Shirley Temple. Back in the day, they had radio shows of the stars. Innately, in his blood, was this passion for stars. He just loved it, and that was his first takeaway. I have to show you this. Isn't this church beautiful and amazing? To the left shows you again what the Met showed in the Byzantine collection of Heavenly Bodies. But here's the Byzantine church. I just really want you to focus on the icons that are here, because there is a connection to his iconic work of how he used celebrity. And you can see from his early drawings, look at these beautiful little line drawings. But today I want to tell you why his art is interesting and worth your consideration. The steel and coal industries dominated the landscape of Forest City, Pittsburgh. The area was poor and largely made up of immigrant families from Eastern Europe. He saw in his early life a father working long periods away. It was the era of the Great Depression and World War II. In 1942, his father died, and the family was poor. His family's body was on view for 3 days. This horrified him. He was hid under the couch. He could not really handle this. But what was very interesting, his father, as poor as he was, put some money away to make sure that he would go to art school. He had good backbone in that his family saw his greatness from day one. And those people who are fortunate to have family members who endorse their children are the blessed ones. And here is a great example. He was poor, but he was blessed this way. So it's interesting I'm showing you the town where his father worked as a laborer in the steel. But look to the right. So he's always looking, and he's seeing the factories. So he starts a studio, which we always think an artist should be in seclusion and be in a quiet studio. But no, he made his studio called the Factory, because the factory was going to be of people. And that was, it will be more to talk about that later on. But I just wanted you to see the juxtaposition of where he comes from, what he sees, and what he does with it. He pushed far beyond the popular. So he changes his name from Warhol to Warhol. He becomes a very, very successful illustrator and lands a job at Glamour and Vogue magazine. His commercial art was in great demand in the 1950s. He did these blotted ink drawings. He used this process in college. He discovered it. The working method, and I don't know, is there any working artist in the audience here? Because it counts if you just do work, that counts as an artist too. So I will explain his method, because I like when I show excavated artists, what's the secret, what turned them on and turned them around, and what got them to be a mega star. He did work as a window dresser, and actually it was a friend who put his, it could have been Bonwood Teller at the time, but that actually launched him because no one was taking him seriously. He was a very successful illustrator. Shoes, always a big theme. The Elvis Presley boot with ink and gold leaves, collage on paper from his Golden Shoe series. Warhol was extremely successful commercial artist, and he was able to then take that to the next level. He was very committed to the fact that his product should sell to the audience. Making money and selling was important. He didn't buy into this poor artist, and he really loved money. So this drawing is one of Warhol's on the whimsical gold leaf work. So what happened, Tiffany's, this was probably something that Tiffany's commissioned. It was a Christmas card on the right with his wonderful lines that he created like this, and then he would gold leaf it. I wanted to share some of his early work so that you can see an artist with a magical way of illustrating his heart and the world. Don't forget Hershey's chocolate was given to him every time he made an entry into his coloring book. I always like, when presenting an artist, to talk about what I call an arrangement. What happens in life, I believe, and this is why I love what I do in talking the language of art, using the artist's story to explain the good and the bad events that happen to a person, to create the divine pattern of what their future destiny is supposed to. So for your information, I think everyone should Google Elizabeth Gilbert's talk of the top 10 TED Talks on creativity, because she's going to tell you historically where creativity has come from historically, and why my excavation of Warhol, of what some of the points I have, makes sense. So Andy's mother didn't want to marry his father, but the only way she agreed she was so poor is that he gave her delicious candy. And again, it was that candy, that nurturing, that every time he made the entry into the coloring book, he got a piece of chocolate. So up on the left, his brother, even with this big fancy estate, he only wanted the drawing that Andy did when he was a young boy. But notice, I'm giving you little signs all the time of where it starts. Look at what you see on the mantle is a crucifix. What's also a very interesting story, in his own beautiful townhouse, and he was had a relationship, I think, with a famous interior designer, Jed Johnson. None of the Warhol works were ever in Warhol's house, but what hung in his bedroom was a large crucifix. I wanted you to keep that in mind, and these are some of his early works, beautiful. I love these two early drawings with ink. You see his simplicity and his stunning fluid lines. So he was drawing from the very beginning. So what I wanted to tell, even if there's one or two, three artists in here, is that his signature technique was to trace and copy images with a blurring line. Warhol began by copying a line drawing in pencil on a piece of non-absorbent paper, such as a tracing paper. Next, he hinged the piece of paper to a second sheet on a more absorbent paper by taping the edges together. So with a fountain pen, he would ink just a small section of drawn lines. He would then transfer the ink onto the second sheet by folding on the hinge. This was blotting the two together. He actually always wanted to get rid of the original. He had this putting together of drawing and printmaking, and he developed this in college. So in the lower part, you can see how he did it. So his original, he would throw it away, the tracing. He also had a very good work ethic, so when they would ask him in commercial art to redo a shoe, to do this, he never had a problem. He felt it was his work ethic. If you ask me to do something, I'll do it until you want it, because people were emotionally attached to how his artwork would come out. You can see an example of this technique on the right with the gold leaf, the ink, and the watercolors. The other two show how magical. He adored angels. I love angels too, but he was doing this from day one. His mother loved angels and cats, and they made a coloring book called Holy Cats. So you knew him to look like this. However, in portrait to the right, he states, "When I did my self-portrait, I left all the pimples out, because you always should. Pimples are a temporary condition, and they don't have anything to do with the way you look." He was very self-conscious. He had a skin disease. He just felt ugly. And yet, he became iconic. Everybody really loved his image. They loved the white wig. They loved it. And that's what he did for everybody else. I think he was handsome. I think he was a very handsome man, but he did not see himself that way. The Statue of Liberty, a symbol of New York, and the migration of the poor immigrants migrating to New York. He was obsessed with celebrity, consumer culture, and mechanical reproduction. I love this picture because he shows the Statue of Liberty with camouflage. Now there's really controversy about this, because in one sense he uses camouflage as America. In other ways, camouflage is to conceal. So what is he really trying to say? We see in that era of Jasper Johns, when he did the target, am I the target, or is this the target? Is this America, or are we hiding? He began literally shopping for ideas, literally and figuratively. He would ask a friend, "What should I paint?" The friend in turn asked, "Come on, Andy, what do you love?" "Oh, I love money and I love Campbell's soup." So if he trusted you, he would ask you. He would get many of ideas from asking people. So let's just talk about the political context of what's happening in art in the 1950s. You've got Jackson Pollock, Rauschenberg, and they were famous for the inner, what we called back in the day, for the inner spirit. New York was governed by very rational people at the time, and the reason that this work, Rauschenberg, and I'm showing you to show you what's happening. You've got the 50s where women are looking so divine and they're going shopping and they're showing you midsummer magic. But why did that happen? Why did it happen that abstract expressionism was in favor? It was because of all of the war and the horrors that we're having in World War II. The intelligentsia, the great artists, teachers came over and crossed to our greatest town. New York is the center of the art universe. Like it or not, that's the truth. It's here. So they felt that it had to be spirit, it had to be non-objective. So here is the 50s, but you have to see, he's saying, maybe I don't have that inner spirit of what you think is painting, but for me, buying is much more American than thinking. And I'm as American as they come. So you're beginning to get this. There was not one Warhol. The artist, the entrepreneur, he made a sizable income from day one. The entrepreneur, the benefit, don't forget the assembly lines in manufacturing. He was looking at that at a very young age. And he's a businessman. So I will tell you the story of Duchamp. I'll show you the story, but those of you who know art in Marcel Duchamp, before this happens, before Pollock, you have to understand that the beauty of studying art history is that it shows a very horizontal line. We have to understand what came here to understand what we're experiencing. So before, when Marcel Duchamp comes with the urinal, and he was a great painter, Duchamp, but he was so sick of that people said, well, he couldn't get into the salon. So he said, okay, I'll show you what art is. I'll put a urinal up on the wall, and that what got known as a ready-made. So pop art was just man-made. Andy was there at the right time, and he wanted to expose art a little. And everyone would say, well, Why is everybody, Lichtenstein's doing comics, you're doing Superman? Why are all these people? He was simple. He'd say, because I guess they're just reading comic books. So again, I explained the political context. The New York school, he had to deal with the abstract expressionist. But he begins to do this, and he's not sure where he's going to do more painterly, or he's going to do it more mechanical. And he's beginning to say, this is the American spirit of what we really are looking at. We are looking at what we are looking at and what we're eating. So pop artists wanted to produce art for everybody. They used subjects that were familiar in everyday life, such as brand objects, newspaper, photographs. Pop art received an enthusiastic response from the people. People felt, so you have to understand, why did the public really accept this now? After being inundated with abstract expressionism, some people can put their arm around it. Now, teaching at the college with millennials, you would be very shocked that this new young generation also is not exactly loving abstract art. It's a small thing. So the pendulum, it's just that it swings. It doesn't matter that it's right or it's wrong. It seems like a generation, we rebel against our parents or what has come forth. So you can think of it that way in art. So the argument of how we might look at the Warhol art, which you'll see when you go to the Whitney, of all these 32 Campbell soup cans, what is the argument? Now imagine, it's so much easier to look at this now because we have so many years since it was done. It takes at least 15 years for a period of art to be accepted. So what might we be looking at? Number one, the tiny variations give the viewer hope that despite the monotony of mass-produced society, glimpses of originality can still break through. Or perhaps could these works inspire the viewer to be original and creative? Or number two, modern consumer society is monotonous. It's the sameness, except for a different flavor of the same thing. So the question, is this a commentary on creativity or its lack? Or what we have put our consumption into art, or even to replace the holy, replacing God? At some point in 1960, Warhol underwent a dramatic change and looking at these. That's why at the end I would like to bring this up to the community and bringing you this different ideas. Like, what are you thinking? I'd like to leave that to the end to know what you're thinking after you're looking at it and understanding what many people are thinking about. But not to forget, his high art was not accepted. This was to become high art. But because he had great success in the business branch, he was a specialist in tabloid art. The black and gray composition, first sketched then and hand painted, then it went to silkscreen. So I hope you're realizing that a lot of the work is silkscreen work. And then this attention, it actually came from Britain, but I have to give credit to, back in the day, I don't know if anyone remembers Leo Castelli Gallery. So here's a story. Leo Castelli was an immigrant, a Jewish immigrant from Italy, who had to come over, again, with World War II, and opened up a gallery. What he did for the American art scene is it took an Italian. It took an Italian to understand what made America, America. And they even say a lot of the Arab countries, as much as they may not like us, they put the Andy Warhol in their basement into like fortresses to keep as investments, because it expresses what America is. But we have to give homage to Leo Castelli for doing this. Warhol's most provides an instant chronicle of what mattered most to people. The Hollywood Blonde in August 1962. Now, he didn't just do this because she was a gorgeous blonde. You have to understand, as much as they thought Warhol was shallow and not deep and superficial, this work was motivated because of her suicide, her entanglement with the president. And also, to let you know, on the lower left is the highest paid Marilyn that went for auction. They seem to love that one more than any of them. So that's why he started it. It was her suicide. He satirized on Hollywood for its mass market entertainment. Not only did he satirize fame, he craved it for himself. However, all these Marilyns are likened to images of the Byzantine Catholic Church that he looked at as a child, his use of gold, and some defined them like kitsch and golden glossy. Now, they made fun of him when he did this, but the public loved it. They loved his work. Then the king, Elvis Presley, Elvis the Pelvis, because of his hip-swinging stage performances, excited American teenage fans and shocked their disapproving parents. Now, when he was doing silk screens on the lower right, his silk screen would say, let's just try overlaying a bunch of them. And that's how he kind of got Elvis with the pelvis. And he would take information from people that he worked with. Watching TV in the 60s, television brought images of death and disaster right into people's living rooms. Many of the death and disaster that you will see uses the same image over and over and over. And he did this because he believed in quantity, even over quality, because he felt this was showing what was going on in a picture. And it was interesting, the car crash, which is amazing for me to understand, is actually that was the highest paid painting ever, is that somebody wanted the car crash because perhaps they felt that this really signifies what America is. We become dull to what we see in the news. So this was happening then, and certainly happening now. And this car crash went for $104 million. We don't know who it is. Death and disaster. It's a gruesome thing to hang on your wall. But somebody did take this painting and did pay this price for this. Remember this, now this is coming back into the news, but the electric chair. Again, people are looking at this, people are seeing it. And look, it's coming up in the news again. But at the time, he wanted to show that we just look at people being electrified and accept it. So this was part of the reason. Along with the war and the gun paintings of the 1980s reaffirms his darker side of the American way that Warhol investigated in his Death and Disaster. This was the iconic placement of the knives that transforms what might be read as a mere kind of kitchen cutlery, of a powerful indictment of what urban violence is. We're talking about that again right now. This I really love. We can all remember where we were when we saw this. The U.S. experienced both affluence and violence in the 60s. With consumer society flourishing and political leaders were being assassinated, it very much moved him. And of course you can see how he would always put things into stills and how he used his color to really show America. This is what moved him, because he felt we were not being moved enough by what we saw. Now, American History from Revolution, this group was known as hustlers and drug addicts, and they were playing at Cafe Bazaar. Here's where Andy heard them for the first time, where Lou Reed was. What was so beautiful, Andy was a really beautiful person. He was gentle and loving, and he put this group that Lou Reed was on. I was telling a little quick story that back in the day, because Lou Reed was gay and different and artistic, his parents sent him to Bellevue to get electric shock, which dulled him and his senses. But I'm telling you the story to show you the humanity of Warhol, in that he went to this place, heard him, and he decided to back him. And then they became this great velvet underground, Lou Reed, that you know of. But it was all through Andy. He was anti-Hollywood. Warhol was aware of how Hollywood dominated the U.S. film industry, and he deliberately tried to make his films different, unlike Hollywood films. Warhol films really have a clear story with a beginning and a middle and an end, in the same way that we see in Hollywood. So like on the left, he had this young men that he just absolutely adored, and he just would do a movie of him sleeping. This didn't go over too well, but it was quite revolutionary. Late 1970s, how anyone remembers Studio 54? Where he really, it said that he really didn't do drugs. He was not a drug user, although Studio 54 was known for sexuality and its drugs, but you can see Bianca Jagger and Liza Minnelli. He just was adored by the whole world in New York, from transvestites to all kinds of, some unsavory, kind of crazy people. These beautiful Rorschach paintings belong to a series modeled on the ink blot test. You know about the Rorschach, but he got this all kind of backwards. He thought that you would look at this, and then the doctors would then look at this test, and then they would tell you what you were thinking. So he kind of got it backwards. He didn't know that they would analyze you. So after Marilyn Monroe and President Kennedy had died, he soon started to publish paintings and photos of them, the fame and notoriety that played with a crucial role in his gallery, the factory. But he got sick of really doing those disasters, and I just had to show you a beautiful shot. His his factory was painted silver and wrapped with silver paper, and these are just beautiful, beautiful floral paintings. But also he was doing this controversially, because I give a talk on Georgia O'Keeffe, and she was being unfairly represented that her paintings were the womb. So he had kind of said, okay, then these paintings will be kind of the anus. If you're going to say she did that, then he was going to do that. I don't think they look like that at all. I think they're beautiful. I think they're like Monet's water lilies, very modern and bold and happy and beautiful. Love this shot of him with his flowers. Okay, we go back to, while Warhol might be one of the most recognizable artists, his attentions were a narrow slice of the Coke bottles and of the Brillo boxes. So I was talking about where this came from. All of these boxes were made with plywood, and they were actually silk screened and hand painted and had stencils. But I wanted to show you, when I spoke about the urinal, that Marcel Duchamp, a very talented painter, actually called this the fountain and signed it Armat. This is where the concept of ready-mades came. So when he came on the scene, it wasn't that he was the first person. Historically, if you look at, I think it's 1907, that's pretty amazing. So when these came, they also looked at him, and then one of the galleries said, you know, you can buy this for $3, why pay this? But he wanted to really express what was going on in the country. He created hundreds of replicas of large supermarket product boxes of Brillo. The finished sculptures were nearly indistinguishable from their cardboard supermarket counterparts. Nobody could tell the difference. And the Brillo boxes were tightly packed and piled high, like a grocery warehouse. So he was saying, buying is much more American than thinking. And I'm as American as they come. So you're beginning, you get this. He was more than what he appeared to be. We all remember this. We all remember where we were when John F. Kennedy, known as JFK, was elected president in 1960. He and his wife seemed to represent a new age in U.S. politics. But 3 years later, on November 22nd, 1963, JFK is assassinated. They were young, they were glamorous, Camelot. Now the contrast in these two pictures is a contrast of two emotions. It's just what he's always doing. In this picture, it is much more powerful than a single image, because what he's trying to do is, in one moment, you remember she's in Dallas and we're watching this on the news. And then the next minute she's horrified. He's trying to show a juxtaposition. Number one, how can we be so happy in a moment and sad? And look what's happening in America, and we're null. So even though Warhol's own attitude, as always, was unusual, he said, "It did not bother me that he, JFK, was dead. What bothered me was the way the television and radio were programming everyone to be sad." That was his comment. Some food for thought concerning how the media manipulates even to this moment. These two lower little pictures just to show how he really was whimsical, his hearts, his flowers. He always did flowers, the earlier work. I think this one to the right is outstanding. It's a modern Monet, and you must admit that he is a fabulous colorist. After silkscreen paintings, as I said, he decided to go into this area. It was just too much disaster. Entrepreneur. As equally as he was an artist, Warhol was an entrepreneur. His career as a commercial illustrator, he had a sizable amount of money, and he believed being good in business is the most fascinating kind of art. Making money is art, and working is art, and good business is art. So he spent much time on this. He also felt if you're going to pay $200,000, let's say, for his painting, it should look like 200. People should be able to go to the wall and say, oh, that's $200,000 on your wall, to be able to actually see what their bank account was worth. So there was a pun on that with the dollar sign. And don't forget his two favorite things when asked were the Campbell soup and money. I like money on the wall. So say you're going to buy, as I said, a $200,000 painting. You ought to know that it's 200,000. I found this one. I love this. This is at, there is an Andy Warhol museum in Pittsburgh. But what I find is interesting, because this is part of my excavation, do you notice how the bills are like a crucifix? So what is it? Is America's God money? I mean, there's definitely a pun on the position of how he does this. His self-portrait, we spoke about the camouflage as a primary metaphor throughout his career. Love this one too. He is very American. And of course, he's obsessed with celebrity, consumer culture, and mechanical reproduction. But he always did these when people either died or committed suicide. It wasn't just because he thought that they were very cool. There was a reason that motivated him to select these people. If you begin to see, these are all people who have been either assassinated, committed suicide, or just passed on. He felt death was very, very abstract, and in a sense, isn't it? Again, his interest to paint Liz, he didn't paint her because she was so gorgeous, even though he thought she was so glamorous. But she was, at that time, dying. And he wanted to show that when he would change the lips of the painting, he could make her look happy. He could manipulate her mouth to put some pop of red in her lips to make her happier as she was supposedly going to pass on. Beautiful one. These are all silk screens. So again, why does he pick now Jackie at this time? Warhol's most notable style is photographic silkscreen. He's picking Jackie and putting her in gold to symbolize the art to the earth. Okay, but what's happening when Jackie comes into power as a first lady, one of the first things she does is go to the cultural exchange and to try and bring the Mona Lisa here. She was very influenced by French culture. So he didn't just do this randomly. He thought, oh, I'll just do Mona Lisa, that's a good image. It became, there was always thought about why he selected this. But then again, he would make a statement, 30 are better than 1. And his Mona Lisa are sold for $165 million. He wanted to show also the concern, and you'll see this at the museum, that red china was becoming a public speculation, and from post-Hiroshima attitudes of death and disaster. And he wanted to show where we were with China. We all know this iconic image. This is just so American. And then he began to, in a sense, be a plagiarist style, where he started to look at the Renaissance, but he began to take away the imagery of some of the details of the tapestry and make it more than his. And he hand painted this canvas. But as he's getting on with things, now we're getting more to the end of his life. Heaven and hell are just one breath away. Negative, positive. Heaven and hell are just one breath away. But now the pop art paintings, the holy is lurking in. He has a fidelity to the original of the Renaissance. And I'm showing you this. I want to get to the end of his life so that I can bring this up to the community. So are we a country who worships money like a god? There's always a metaphor lurking in. Does God have a value? And screen printing is a printing technique that he uses. What it is a woven mesh to support an ink blocking stencil to receive the desired image. And then you put a squeegee across the screen to get the image. To get the color has to be many screens put on one on top of another. So remember from the beginning, he didn't want to touch. He didn't want the original. There was something, and he also didn't want to be touched. This is probably my favorite one of all that he's ever done. People don't know that he did this, and they don't even know where it comes from, but this is screen printing. This is Botticelli and the Venus, iconic, and you can see Botticelli. I give you a close-up on the upper right, and then what he does. I love this one because his color, he may have done 60 of them, but for me, how he's able to get the very soft colors that were like very much the way Botticelli rendered this. I wanted you to see the original mural painting that portrays the scene that Christ was having his Last Supper with his 12 apprentices before being arrested. And then to see how he does camouflage. Is it a metaphor to this very iconic painting? Is he saying we as Americans need to go back to God? Remember, this is his last collection. We're getting to the end of his life. Be somebody from a body is a parable repeated in several forms with Christ. Here's him with this beautiful painting, and sometimes he does it very hazy because he wants you to get inside of the painting and maybe not look at it, but it's the feeling. Don't forget, he looked and stayed in church for hours and hours on a Sunday. Warhol knew Leonardo's famous painting from his earliest days via a very cheap color reproduction that his mother had in the family home. Don't forget, Byzantine artwork is known for the diptych paintings and altarpieces. He joins them like that. He was an expert at that. He looked at that. This is amazing. Andy Warhol's portrait of Jews in the 20th century is incredibly recognizable of Jews around the world. Now, Warhol's investment in the series might have seemed quite shallow, for he merely stated he liked their faces and he was interested in their celebrity status. When the series was first exhibited in 1980 at the Jewish Museum in New York, it was met with such much negative response. Many critics felt Warhol was exploiting his Jewish subjects without truly understanding their significance. Yet, this was Warhol's intent, to make a series which mirrors the surface glamour which accompanies any celebrity. And he did say, and they made a stamp of him. This is his great quote: "If you want to know all about Andy Warhol, just look at the surface of my paintings and films and me, and there I am. There is nothing behind it. Nothing." He's consistent. It's my little retrospective to kind of sum this up. I believe his greatest work was his later work before death. He was raised in the Christian Byzantine Catholic imagination where the holy always was lurking within. I hope you will look at art with more heart and always search for where the holy or call for where the divine just might be lurking. Do hope you go to Elizabeth Gilbert on her creativity. Again, thank you, Penny, and for giving me the opportunity to bring this to you. I also want you to see on January 23rd, Valerie Solanas, a writer who had appeared in a Warhol film, read it from here, appeared in a Warhol film, came to the studio and shot him. Warhol was physically and emotionally scarred by his near-fatal shooting. He was never quite the same after it. But what happens, Warhol visits Milan for the exhibition of his Last Supper pictures. He was asked by the Italian government to do this. 1 month later, ironically, he unexpectedly dies that very year, 1 month later. His legacy, a celebration of the very aspects of American culture that his work criticized. His net worth at his death was $220 million. He left instructions that his estate be used to create a foundation for the support of the visual artist. His brother John would be made a trustee, which he's been doing. Warhol modern icon images were created and influenced from his devotion to the Byzantine Christian church that he worshipped the days before he died. He attended Mass almost daily. Other days he would just slip into St. Vincent Fur on Lexington Avenue and drop into the back pew and pray. I was just hoping that perhaps we can open this up, because I know many people might have different points of view, and it would be wonderful if everyone can kind of express what they think and how they see it, and bring more light, more spotlight onto Andy Warhol. Thank you for having me.